The Buffalo crime family, also known as the Magaddino crime family, the New York State crime family, the Todaro crime family and the Arm, is an Italian-American mafia crime family based in Buffalo, New York, United States. The family has operated throughout western New York, Erie, Pennsylvania, and Hamilton, Ontario. The Buffalo family have had strong connections with the Hamilton-based Lupino and Papaglia families. The current boss of the Buffalo crime family is Joseph E. Big Joe Todaro Jr., who has been running the crime family since his father Joseph E. Lead Pipe Joe Todaro Sr. retired. History: in the early 1900s, Angelo Palmieri was the first boss in Buffalo. By 1912, he stepped down, assuming the role of underboss, while handing the title of boss to Joseph D. Carlo. In 1921, Stefano Magaddino, who had immigrated first to New York City from Castellammare del Golfo, Sicily in 1902, fled to Buffalo, New York to avoid murder charges related to the death of Camillo Caso in Avon, New Jersey, who had killed Magaddino's brother Pietro. Buffalo crime family boss Joseph DiCarlo died in 1922, and Magaddino succeeded him as boss. The Buffalo crime family gained power during the Prohibition era through bootlegging. In 1931, the family boss, Stefano Magaddino, became an original member of the Commission, the governing body of the American Mafia. Magaddino's strongest ally on the commission was his cousin Joseph Bonanno. The two mafia bosses were from the same Sicilian town of Castellammare del Golfo. The commission decided in 1931 that Stefano Magaddino and his Buffalo family would control Ontario, Canada, and that Joseph Bonanno and his Bonanno family would control Quebec, Canada. The Buffalo family remained strong and relatively united until his leadership was challenged in the 1960s. It then split into factions as they tried to assassinate Magaddino. Magaddino's empire began to crumble in 1968, when police found $500,000 stashed away in Magaddino's funeral home and his son's attic. At that time, Magaddino had been telling his underlings that money was tight, and he could not afford to pay them Christmas bonuses. Hardnett said, "People began to stop trusting him when we found all that money." The internal war continued after Magaddino's death from natural causes on July 19, 1974, but ended in the early 1980s when Joseph Todaro Sr. became the boss. Todaro Sr. era: when Todaro Sr. took over the Buffalo family, many members had been operating within the Laborers International Union of North America Local 210 to avoid police scrutiny for years while they continued to operate illegal activities. In 1989, Joseph Todaro Sr. and his son Joseph Todaro Jr. were identified in an FBI gambling investigation as the leaders of the 45-member Buffalo Mafia family. The FBI investigation claimed that Joseph Todaro Sr. and Joseph Todaro Jr. were in control of various criminal activities that included labor racketeering, bookmaking, loan sharking, and narcotics trafficking. It was also claimed that Joseph Todaro Jr. was running the Mafia family on behalf of his semi-retired father Joseph Todaro Sr., who was splitting time between his Tonawanda and Florida homes. The FBI stated that Local 210 member Leonard F. Falzone controlled a loan sharking operation for the Todaros, and brothers Victor and Daniel Sansonese, who were also members of Local 210, controlled a bookmaking operation for the Todaros. It was also revealed that during the investigation, the FBI had planted a recording device in Falzone's union-owned car in 1988, but that recording device was unable to provide any evidence linking the Todaros to any illegal gambling. The information provided by the listening device planted in Falzone's '87 Buick was responsible for the dismantling of Torina drug ring, which was doing more than $2 million in street sales of cocaine annually in the Buffalo area. Special Agent George Preston, chief of the D's Buffalo office, told reporters, "This is a mob-controlled drug ring." G. Robert Langford, special agent in charge of the Buffalo FBI office said, conversations overheard in the car of Leonard Falzone indicated that this drug operation was being directed by the mob hierarchy in Buffalo, although there was not enough evidence to charge Falzone or Dodaro in the ongoing investigation at that time. Early arrests in this case included known mob associates, Joseph Pepe Canizzaro, Albino, Shasha Principe, and Salvatore Sam Naples Napoli. The investigation into the Torino drug ring revealed Todaro and Falzone were involved in the Las Vegas to Buffalo pipeline for cocaine and other illegal activities. On March 20, 1990, Las Vegas police arrested 3 Buffalo natives: Louis Jambrone, Joseph Amoya and Lawrence Panero. All 3 were identified as associates of the Buffalo mob. Charles Torina, a Buffalo native who was described as a key link in the Buffalo to Las Vegas drug pipeline, had previously worked as a pit boss in a Las Vegas casino. In 1990, Canadian police arrested 14 suspects in a drug ring that had connection to organized crime in Buffalo and Niagara Falls. According to a law enforcement official who spoke under the condition of anonymity, any drug activity or any organized crime activity in St. Catharines, Hamilton and Niagara Falls must be approved by the Buffalo family, one lawman said. The mob families in those cities, and in Toronto, answer to Buffalo. Those arrested were described as associates of a Niagara Falls, NY businessman named John Anticoli, who was serving a 10-year term in federal prison. Law enforcement told reporters that 2 of the suspects are considered high-ranking members of a Hamilton organized crime family under the indirect control of the Buffalo mob. Anticoli was described by the FBI as one of the biggest drug dealers ever arrested in western New York. He pleaded guilty to possessing 270 pounds of marijuana, conspiracy to distribute cocaine, tax evasion, and failure to pay taxes on cocaine profits. Of the 14 suspects arrested, Carmen Burlaro, Nicodemo Brutzes and Dominic Vaccaro were said to be made members of a Hamilton-based mafia family that reports to Buffalo organized crime leaders. In 1996, Joseph Todaro Sr. and his son Joseph Todaro Jr. were listed among 24 alleged organized crime figures who were accused of influencing the Laborers International Union of North America since the 1960s. The Laborers Local 210 forced Joseph A. Todaro Jr., Frank Bifolco, Salvatore Cardinale, John Catanzaro, Leonard Falzone, Sam Frangimore, Bart Mazzara, Robert Pinaro, Donald Pane Pinto, John A. Perry, Joseph R. Perry, Charles Pusateri, Joseph Rosato, Danny Sansonese Jr., Victor Sansonese, Louis Securella and Vincent Jimmy Securella out of the Union. In late 1996, the Buffalo family along with the Los Angeles crime family joined forces to take over a loan sharking and auto insurance fraud racket in Las Vegas controlled by Herbert Blitzstein, a Chicago outfit associate. The LA underboss Carmen Milano along with LA soldiers Steven Sino and Louis Caruso and L.A. associates Johnny Branco and Peter Caruso originally planned to rob and steal Herbert Blitzstein's jewelry. After robbing Blitzstein, the LA mobsters planned to have Buffalo family soldier Robert Bobby Pinaro fence the stolen jewelry. Carmen Milano decided that Buffalo family boss Joseph Todaro Sr. would receive a piece of the Blitzstein's Las Vegas rackets. The job of robbing Blitzstein was given to Peter Caruso, but Caruso changed the plan and decided to murder Blitzstein and take over his Las Vegas operations. On January 6, 1997, LA associates Antonio Davi and Richard Friedman shot and killed Blitzstein in his own home. In 1997, the Buffalo family's Canadian faction boss Johnny Papalia and his lieutenant Carmen Burlaro were murdered by Kenneth Murdoch. When the police arrested Kenneth Murdoch in 1999, he decided to become a government witness. Murdoch told authorities that he was ordered by brothers Pasquale, Pat Musitano and Angelo Musitano of the Musitano crew to murder both Johnny Papalia and Carmen Burlaro. According to Murdoch, the Musitano brothers had been fed up with being a satellite crew of the Buffalo family and having to pay tribute money to the family. Murdoch also claimed that he was waiting for Pat Musitano to approve the murders of 4 Lupino crew members, Natalie Lupino and Vincenzo Lupino, the 2 sons of Giacomo Lupino, and Dominic Violi and Giuseppe Violi, the 2 sons of Paolo Violi. Also revealed by Murdoch was that Pat Musitano had discussed with Quebec Mafia boss Vito Rizzuto and Gaetano Panepinto about Rizzuto investing in Ontario. The Canadian intelligence agencies had observed meetings in October 22 to 23, 1997 between Pat Musitano and Vito Rizzuto, which become more significant after the deaths of Johnny Papaglia and Carmen Burlaro. Eventually, the Canadian intelligence agencies were convinced that the Musitano brothers did not act alone in the murders of Johnny Papaglia, Carmen Burlaro and Ennio Mortadella in 1998. These factors led Lee Coppola, veteran organized crime reporter for the Buffalo News, to write an article titled The Withered Arm. In it he stated, "Today's Buffalo mob, disorganized and all but penniless, is a far cry from its heyday, and that the last visible remnants of mob power in Buffalo disappeared." However, Coppola's pronouncement was premature. In 1999, Joseph E. Todaro Sr. along with his son Joseph A. Todaro Jr. and 16 others were named in a civil racketeering lawsuit for controlling Local 210 through the years by various racketeering acts. The court complaint identified Joseph E. Todaro Sr. as boss and his son Joseph A. Todaro Jr. as underboss of the Buffalo family and the owners of La Nova Pizzeria. Todaro Sr. never belonged to Local 210, but his son Todaro Jr. served as Local 210 business manager in 1990 before resigning. The charges were based on the testimony of Ronald M. Fino, a former business manager of Local 210 before he became an FBI informant. Over the course of the later part of the 20th century and the first part of the 21st, the Buffalo crime family declined in influence. Factors included older members slowly turning away from the organization, younger Italian Americans showing no interest in its operations, an 11-year federal operation that forced the family out of Local 210 between 1995 and 2006, introduction of the New York lottery depriving the family of a major revenue source, illegal gambling revenue, and the rise of Joe Todaro Jr.'s legitimate pizzeria business. Todaro Jr. and Falzone Todaro Sr. retired in 2006, leaving many in law enforcement to believe Leonard Falzone had taken his place. However, others thought he was only acting as the front boss for the Todaros and that Joseph Todaro Jr. was the acting boss while his father became the senior statesman for the family. The FBI continued to release the crime family's organizational charts until at least 2006. The Niagara Falls Reporter indicated Leonard Falzone was promoted to the top spot after Joe Todaro Sr. reportedly stepped down in 2006. After the deaths of Todaro Sr. in 2012 and Benjamin "Sonny" Nicoletti in 2013, rumors swirled about who would lead the family. In 2012, Matt Gritta, crime reporter for the Buffalo News, said that many believe the family had expanded into the new millennium through telemarketing, pump and dump stock scams and internet pornography, with the family expanding its operations nationwide. That same year, Dan Herbeck wrote an article about Ronald Fino called "Life After Local 210" for the FBI's Inside Guy. The article indicated Fino was skeptical of the Justice Department's claims that mob influences were totally removed from Local 210 and the Laborers International. Ronald believed the federal trusteeship the government established to clean the union didn't go far enough. Additionally, the Toronto Star's organized crime reporter Peter Edwards indicated that in 2013 the Buffalo crime family was seeking to revive itself from recent losses to loan sharking at the Casino Niagara in Canada on the American border. In the late 2000s, news broke about a homeowner association (HOA) scam alleged to have ties to the Buffalo mob. A witness told the FBI that the Silver Lining Construction Company was controlled by the New York mob and that its owner, Leon Benzer, thought of himself as a soprano because of his association with attorney John V. Spilotro, the nephew of Vegas mobster Tony Spilotro. Investigators also disclosed a key player in one of the HOA takeovers was Paul Satelli, who was known to have ties to the Buffalo mob. According to George Knapp, teen reporter for CBS News affiliate Kloss News Now Channel 8 in Vegas, the FBI said Satelli is affiliated with the Buffalo mob. Joseph Bravo, another defendant in this HOA scam, was indicted with Paul Satelli for being a part of a Las Vegas to Niagara Falls cocaine trafficking ring run by the Buffalo mob from the late 1980s to mid-1990s, when it was considered the dominant La Cosa Nostra family on the streets of Las Vegas. Canadian intelligence indicated a new crime lord linked to the powerful Todaro crime family had been installed over the Golden Horseshoe region of Ontario. According to CISC intelligence, the new, yet unidentified, Buffalo boss had a strong relationship with outlaw bikers, unlike his predecessor Johnny Papalia, who refused to work with them. As a result of this new, yet shaky, alliance, organized crime expert Detective Sergeant Peter Polchetti of the CISC said, the Todaro family now controls Niagara, Hamilton, Toronto and Montreal. Current position of the family. In March 2017, nearly 20 years after Coppola's article, The Withered Arm, Dan Herbeck wrote a similar piece titled, The Mafia is All But Dead in Western New York. In it, the FBI field office in Buffalo stated only scattered remnants that are no longer believed to be active or organized remain. The piece, also, highlighted many of the same factors that the 1998 article cited for the decline of the Buffalo crime family. However, arrests by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and Project Outremans indicate the pronouncements about the Buffalo crime family's demise are overstated. In November 2017, the FBI and Canadian newspapers indicated the family is still active. In November 2017, Giuseppe, Joe, and Domenico Violi, who have long-standing ties to the Buffalo mob, were arrested on narcotics trafficking charges. These charges show a continuation of the long-established mafia drug trafficking triangle from Toronto, Hamilton, Ontario to Buffalo and Montreal to New York City, established by Stefano Magaddino and his cousin, Joseph Bonanno. Michael McGarity of the FBI said the Outremans operation unearthed and dug up the roots of a partnership extending from New York City to Buffalo and Toronto to Montreal, proving once again that Italian organized crime groups have evolved far beyond the neighborhood cliques of days gone by. Additionally, Peter Edwards in the Toronto Star wrote, the arrests also hit members of the Buffalo crime family headed by the late Joe Todaro. The U.S. Department of Justice said that Canadian law enforcement authorities had arrested various members and associates of the Bonanno, Gambino, and Todaro crime families on charges that include narcotics trafficking. In response to these arrests, Canadian journalist Adrian Humphreys wrote, among those arrested in Canada are members of the Todaro organized crime family, based in Buffalo, according to U.S. authorities. The Todaro crime group was built by the now-deceased Joseph Todaro Sr., who took over the Buffalo Mafia once led by the influential boss Stefano, the Undertaker Magaddino. Further, in September 2018, Peter Edward reported that the Buffalo mob isn't dead, despite some media reports. According to his article, the Buffalo Todaro crime family is strong enough to call the shots in the recent mob war between the Musitano and other crime families in the Hamilton underworld. This article reports, New York State mob still has considerable influence in the Southern Ontario underworld, sources say. I don't think anyone knows for certain how this plays out. One thing's for sure, Buffalo will always have a say north of the border. Paul Manning, a former Hamilton undercover police officer who worked on organized crime investigations. Buffalo would have to give approval for high-level killings, sources said, adding that mob leaders there are believed to have turned their backs on one side in the dispute and given tacit approval to the other. They're all supposed to be under Buffalo, one source said of the two feuding Ontario crime factions. Buffalo factions of traditional organized crime are not in Canada per se, but historically have controlled aspects of Canadian family business and do get kickbacks from profits from illicit activity, Manning said. Reporters allege that ally of Verona Van Castor was killed in September 2018 in retaliation for the May 2017 murder of Angelo Musitano. Rumors circulated that the murder was related to an unpaid debt and rivalries between Niagara mobsters and influence from the Buffalo mob. Revenge was another reason for Angelo's death. James Dubrow indicates this hit wasn't just approved by the Buffalo crime family, but ordered by Domenico Violi, later to be revealed as the Buffalo Mafia's underboss. Angelo's murder occurred 20 years to the month after Musitano hitman Kenneth Murdoch killed Johnny "Pops" Papaglia, the longtime Buffalo mob captain and head of the Papaglia crime family, and his right-hand man Carmen Berlaro, a Buffalo and Papaglia crime family soldier. Additionally, the Toronto Sun claims that the current mob war in southern Ontario has its roots in the mob conflict that had Paolo Violi and his brothers Francesco and Rocco, Domenico, Dom, and Giuseppe, Joe, Violi's dad and uncles, murdered in Montreal during the late 1970s by the Rizzuto crime family. This was suggested as early as 2010 when Globe and Mail article stated, "A general picture is emerging of the power struggle overwhelming the Rizzutos. It's likely that Calabrese families, largely based in Toronto and backed by big players in New York State, are seizing control after the Rizzutos pushed them aside." In 2019, Brad Hunter explained, "It may have taken years, but the Violi family were not going to let sleeping dogs lie." Nicola Rizzuto Jr. was gunned down on December 28, 2009, followed by the disappearance of his brother-in-law Paolo Renda on May 10, 2010. Renda was the Rizzuto crime family consigliere at the time of his murder. Finally, Nicola Rizzuto Sr. was killed by a sniper on November 10, 2010. Dr. Anna Sergi, lecturer in criminology at the Department of Sociology, University of Essex, United Kingdom, and Deputy Director of the Center for Criminology, confirms the Ocherman's operation, which resulted in the Violi brothers' arrests, indicates New York crime families are using drug trafficking routes they established long ago and that these families are being reinvigorated by their long-established working relationships with the Calabrian Mafia in Canada. However, her article calls into question the current affiliation of the Dodaro crime family in Buffalo. She indicates it is a crime syndicate formerly aligned with the LCN, La Cosa Nostra families of New York. See chart and linked article. New York crime families survive and collaborate. On December 3, 2018, Domenico Violi was sentenced to 8 years in prison for his role in the mob drug trafficking ring unearthed by Project Otremens. During the investigation, police listened in as the agent and Violi discussed a variety of criminal activity and profit-making opportunities. Violi trafficked approximately 260,000 pills, including PCP, MDMA and meth, to the undercover RCMP agent for more than $416,000, during which the agent was officially inducted as a made member of the Bonanno crime family in Canada. He also received another $24,000 as his cut of the profit. Wiretaps indicated Violi was made the underboss of the Buffalo crime family by boss Joseph Todaro Jr. in October 2017 in a meeting in Florida, the first Canadian to hold the second highest position in the American Mafia. After being promoted to underboss, Violi is heard on wiretaps boasting that he had beaten out 30 other people for the position, indicating the Buffalo family had at least 30 made men, which included Canadian members such as the Violi brothers' uncles, Natalie and Rocco Lupino. In his new role, Violi was to assume control over the operations of the Lupino-Violi crime family and solidify his power base with further and greater collaboration with the New York-based mafia families. The wiretaps also revealed the activity of the Commission, the governing body of the American Mafia, as Violi's promotion was so unusual that Buffalo crime family boss, Joe Todaro Jr., consulted with the Commission for permission to promote him as Buffalo's new underboss. On the 30th of January 2019, Cece Lupino, the son of Rocco Lupino, and grandson of Giacomo Lupino, was killed at his parents' Hamilton home. According to wiretaps from the Violi brothers' case, Giuseppe Violi told the undercover agent back in February 2015 that Cece Lupino had been approached about becoming a MAID member, but Cece had told his father that if he could make money he would be involved, but if not, he doesn't want to be involved, that there are too many headaches. Hamilton police have extended their search for Lupino's killer across the Canadian border into the United States, asking Buffalo area police and news agencies to disseminate pictures of the suspect taken from surveillance cameras. An attempt on Pasquale, Pat Musitano's life was made outside the office of his lawyer, Joseph Irving, in Mississauga on the morning of April 25, 2019. According to reports, Pat was shot 4 times, once in the head. The Buffalo News indicated that Musitano had organized crime enemies in Montreal and Buffalo, and that crime reporter, Peter Edwards, said he was more convinced than ever that the Buffalo mob was a player in the shooting after a source kept repeating Buffalo over and over while talking about the incident. Additionally, the CBC News in Canada reported Buffalo underboss Domenico Violi was recorded by a police informant in September 2017 as saying the murder of Angelo Musitano was meant to be a message to his brother Pat, and that before Christmas Pat would be gone and that would be one headache out of the way. On July 10, 2020, Pat Musitano was shot to death in Burlington. Historical leadership. Boss, official and acting 1908-1912, Benedetto Angelo, Buffalo Bill Palmieri, stepped down, becoming underboss. 1912-1922, Giuseppe Don Pietro Di Carlo Sr., died July 9, 1922-1974, Stefano, The Undertaker Magaddino, died of natural causes on July 19, 1974, at the age of 82. Acting 1960-1967, Federico Freddy Lupo the Wolf Randacchio, imprisoned on June 29, 1967, 1974, 1984, Salvatore Samuel Sam the Farmer Frangemore, appointed by the Commission, stepped down and died on November 28, 1999. Acting 1977-1978, Salvatore J. Sam Jones Perry, arrested on November 20, 1978, died on July 24, 1981. Acting 1978-1981, Joseph A. Perry Sr., demoted 1984-2006, Joseph E. Lead Pipe Joe Dodaro Sr., semi-retired in 1989, officially retired in 2006, died on December 26, 2012. Acting 1989-2006, Joseph A. Big Joe Dodaro Jr., acting boss for his father Dodaro Sr. until 2006 when his father retired. 2006 present, Joseph A. Big Joe Dodaro Jr. After Falzone died, it was revealed that he was the boss. Acting 2006-2016, Leonard F. Lenny Falzone served as front boss. Died on November 12, 2016. Underboss, official and acting 1912-1920, Benedetto Angelo, Buffalo Bill Palmieri, became consigliere 1920-1922. Stefano, The Undertaker Magaddino, became boss 1922-1932. John C. Montana, became consigliere 1932-1956. Angelo Acquisto, died 1956-1967. Federico Freddy Lupo Randacchio, imprisoned on June 29, 1967-1968. Peter Magaddino, the son of boss Stefano Magaddino, stepped down 1968-1974. Joseph M. Fino, arrested September 1971, acting 1971-1972. Daniel Boots Sansones, arrested September 1971, 1974, 1981. Salvatore Sam Perry, became acting boss, arrested on November 20, 1978, died on July 24, 1981, acting 1978-1981. Joseph A. Perry Sr., became acting boss, became underboss 1981-1984. Joseph A. Perry Sr., became consigliere 1985-2006. Joseph A. Big Joe Dodaro Jr., the son of boss Joseph Dodaro Sr., became boss 2006-2012. Benjamin Sonny Nicoletti Jr., Niagara Falls mobster, died on September 3, 2012, 2017, unknown 2017 present. Domenico Violi, Canadian mobster, imprisoned December 3, 2018. Consigliere, official and acting 1920-1932. Benedetto Angelo, Buffalo Bill Palmieri, died 1932-1958. John C. Montana, stepped down, died in 1967, 1958, 1968. And Nino Magaddino, the brother to boss Stefano Magaddino, stepped down acting 1968-1974. Joseph, the Wolf DiCarlo 1974-1978. Joseph A. Perry Sr., became acting underboss 1978-1981. Vincent Scrow, demoted 1981-1984. Joseph E. Lead Pipe Joe Dodaro Sr., promoted to boss 1984-1987. Joseph A. Perry Sr., retired 1987-2006. Leonard F. Lenny Falzone, imprisoned 1994, promoted to front boss acting 1994-1999. Donald the Turtle Panepinto 2006 present, unknown. Current members: Administration boss, Joseph A. Big Joe Dodaro Jr., boss of the family and owner of the La Nova Pizzeria in Buffalo. In the early 1980s, his father Joseph Dodaro Sr. became boss of the Buffalo family and promoted him to underboss. In 1996, Dodaro along with Leonard Falzone, Frank Bifalco and brothers John and Joseph Perry were forced out of Local 210. In 2006, he became boss when his father Joe Dodaro Sr. retired and used Leonard Falzone as his front boss until 2016 when Falzone died. In 2017, he promoted Canadian mobster Domenico Violi to underboss of the family with the approval of the New York Bonanno, Genovese and Colombo families. Underboss, Domenico Violi, underboss of the Buffalo family operating from the Canadian faction. His father Paolo Violi was a capo in the Bonanno crime family operating in Montreal's Cotrani crime family before being murdered in 1978 by the Sicilian faction of the family. His grandfather Giacomo Lupino was the boss of Hamilton's Lupino crime family. After the death of his father, he moved back to Hamilton with his mother and brother. His brother Giuseppe Joe Violi also operates in the Lupino family. In January 2015, he became a made member of the Buffalo family. In October 2017, Violi met boss Joseph Dodaro Jr. in Florida and was promoted to underboss of the Buffalo family, the first Canadian to hold the second highest position in the American mafia. On December 3, 2018, Violi was sentenced to 8 years in prison after pleading guilty trafficking drugs. Capo Regime's Buffalo faction: Frank Butchie Bifalco, capo of the West Side Buffalo crew. In 1993, Bifalco along with Gaetano, Tommy Joac Micelli, John Catanzaro, Joseph Dodaro III, the son of Joseph Dodaro Jr. Frank Drippy, Samuel Amoya Jr., the grandson of Sam Perry, Michael A. Muscarella, Larry Panaro, Steve Sacco and Vincent Spano were linked to telemarketing firms that were raided by the FBI. In 1996, Bifalco along with Joseph Todaro Jr., Leonard Falzone, and brothers John and Joseph Perry were forced out of Local 210. Bifalco was the deputy administrator and collection coordinator for the Local 210 pension fund before being forced out of the union. In September 2001, Bifalco was arrested by the FBI for torching an associate's rented car in a shopping mall parking lot in an insurance scam. UTICA faction. Russell E. Russ Carcone, capo of the Utica crew. In 1989, Carcone along with his father Benedetto and others were indicted on racketeering. In December 1990, Carcone, his father Benedetto P. Benny, Jack J. Jake Minnie Cone Jr., Anthony J. and Sarah and Jack Zogby were convicted of running a criminal enterprise centered in Utica from 1973 to 1989, and crimes that included extortion, loan sharking, illegal gambling, trafficking in stolen property and murder. His father Benny ran operations from the swap shop at 512 Albany Street in Utica and forced the local bookmakers to make regular payments to him and his son Russ. In 2000, an indictment charged 25 individuals of the Utica-based shoplifting and fencing ring who stole goods valued in the tens of millions of dollars from hundreds of retail store chains like Walmart, Kmart, CVS, BJ's Wholesale Club and other stores in and around Oneida, Herkimer, Fulton, Madison, Montgomery, Albany and other counties in upstate New York. The Utica shoplifting ring worked in teams and stole items for quick resale like razor blades, batteries and compact discs. On March 23, 2004, his father Benedetto Benny died and he took over the Utica crew. Canadian faction. Rocco Lupino, capo of the Lupino crew in Hamilton, Canada. His father Giacomo Lupino was a powerful Canadian mobster within the Buffalo family. His brother Nat Lupino is a made man in the crew. On January 30, 2019, his son Cease Lupino was murdered in front of his brother's Nat Lupino Hamilton home. Soldiers John A. Perry, soldier operating in Buffalo. His father Joseph Perry and his uncle Sam Perry were powerful members of the Buffalo family. In 1996, Perry along with his brother Joseph R. Perry Jr., Joseph Dodaro Jr., Leonard Falzone and Frank Bifalco were forced out of Local 210. Victor Sansonese, soldier. His father Daniel G. Sansonese and brother Daniel Sansonese Jr. were both members of the Buffalo family. He became a made member in the mid-1970s. In 1989, Victor and his brother Daniel Sansonese Jr. were identified as Local 210 officials and were accused of controlling bookmaking for the Todaros. In 1996, Sansonese was removed from Local 210 where he had been serving as director of training. Robert Bobby Panaro, a soldier operating a car dealership in Las Vegas. In 1997, Panaro was indicted along with members of the Los Angeles crime family for the robbery and murder of Chicago Outfits Las Vegas associate Herbert Blitzstein. Peter Jarris Sr., soldier in Buffalo. His father-in-law was Joseph Todaro Sr., his brother-in-law is Boss Joseph Todaro Jr. and his two sons Peter Jarris Jr. and Anthony Jarris are associates of the Buffalo family. In 1996, Jarris along with Frank Bifalco, Salvatore Cardinale, John Catanzaro, Leonard Falzone, Sam Frangimore, Bart Mazzara, Robert Panaro, Donald Pane Pinto, John A. Perry, Joseph R. Perry, Charles Pusateri, Joseph Rosato, Danny Sansonese Jr., Victor Sansonese, Louis Sicurella, Vincent, Jimmy Sicurella and Joseph A. Todaro Jr. were forced out of Local 210 Luina. Jarris later stepped down from his business manager position in Local 210. He had served as Local 210 president, business manager and business agent before he was forced out of the union. Donald, the Turtle Pane Pinto, a soldier in the Buffalo family and former member of Local 210. His two sons Mark and Don Panepinto worked in Local 210 and later became attorneys. On September 6, 1993, his daughter Dana Christine Panepinto married Joseph Edward Todaro, the son of Joseph Todaro Jr. In 1996, Panepinto along with other members of the Buffalo family were forced out of Local 210 Luina. In March 2000, Panepinto along with John Catanzaro, Frank Mambrino, and his son Carmen Mambrino, Joseph DeGioia, and Nuncio Canizzaro and Robert Chimera were indicted and charged with running an illegal gambling business from the Donato Social Club on 188 Grant Street in 2014. His oldest son Mark Panepinto was elected into New York State Senate. In late 2018, his son Mark Panepinto was sentenced to 2 months in prison on public corruption charges. Associates Joseph Edward Joey Todaro III is the son of Joseph Todaro Jr., the boss of family, and the grandson of Joseph Todaro Sr., the former boss of the Buffalo family. In June 1993, Todaro along with Frank Bifolco, Gaetano Miceli, John Catanzaro, Frank Drippi, Samuel Amoya Jr., the grandson of Sam Perry, Michael A. Muscarella, Larry Pinaro, Steve Sacco and Vincent Spano were linked to telemarketing firms that were raided by the FBI. Joey Todaro III runs the family-owned La Nova Pizzeria in Buffalo with his father, Pete Jarris Jr., associate of the Buffalo family and operator of Pharaoh's Gentlemen's Club in Cheektowaga. His father Peter Jarris Sr., who owns the club, married Joe Todaro Jr.'s sister, and his brother Anthony Jarris is also a mobster. On December 17, 2019, his strip club was raided by Homeland Security agents because of his brother Anthony Jarris and retired Buffalo DEA agent Joe Bongiovanni were indicted on drugs and weapons charges. In 2000, Jarris was indicted along with Michael Geiger on 1 count of wire fraud for their part to defraud victims in a telemarketing scheme. From late 1992 until February 1995, the men ran Advance Distributing Company, a Kenmore firm that cheated customers with promises that they could win a new Cadillac or up to $40,000 in cash. Jarris pleaded guilty to the scheme in 2005 after the trial was delayed over mere dispute regarding the admission of evidence. Attorney Paul Camaria Jr. indicated the government may be trying to link Peter Jarris Jr. to his client Joseph Bongiovanni's case, and remove him as counsel. Bongiovanni is a Buffalo-based DEA agent who was indicted for allegedly accepting bribes to protect his drug-dealing friends who had ties to the Buffalo mafia. Cambria had defended Jarris in his wire fraud case. Anthony Jarris, associate of the Buffalo family. His father Peter Jarris Sr. married Joe Todaro Jr.'s sister, and his brother Peter Jarris Jr. is the operator of Pharaoh's Strip Club. On May 10, 2019, Anthony Jarris along with retired Buffalo DEA agent Joe Bongiovanni were indicted on drugs and weapons charges. Peter Capitano Jr., associate of the Buffalo family, a member of the Pizza Gang who was identified by Ron Fino as a strong associate of Victor Sansonese and Joe Todaro Jr. In 1996, Peter, along with his brother Sam, led the dissident faction that fought the federal trusteeship of Local 210 meant to rid the union of mob control and influence. He was suspended for 1 year and was prevented for holding the leadership position in the local for 5 years. Sam Capitano, associate of the Buffalo family, a member of the Pizza Gang who was identified by Ron Fino as a confidant of Joe Todaro Jr. In 1996, Sam, along with his brother Peter, led the dissident faction that fought the federal trusteeship of Local 210 meant to rid the union of mob control and influence. Capitano attacked Rossetti at one meeting, grabbing a microphone and yelling, "Gabe, you got no balls." The next day, the two got into a fistfight and Rossetti fired Capitano from the board, an action Capitano has contested before the National Labor Relations Board. He was suspended from the union for 1 year and was prevented for holding the leadership position in the local for 5 years. Past members Leonard F. Lenny Falzone, the former acting boss and consigliere. In 1988, the FBI had bugged Falzone's union-owned car for 6 months in an effort to link the Dodaros in the illegal gambling, but they were unable to get any evidence. In 1989, Falzone was identified as a local 210 official who controlled a loan sharking operation for the Todaros. On July 11, 1994, Consigliere Falzone was convicted for his role as the administrator of benefit funds for Leona Local 210 and for collecting unlawful debts. His brother Frank Falzone replaced him as administrator of benefit funds for Leona Local 210. In 1996, while Falzone was in prison for racketeering and loan sharking, he was forced out of Local 210 along with Joseph Todaro Jr., Frank Bifalco and brothers John and Joseph Perry. In 1999, Falzone was named in civil racketeering lawsuit filed by Local 210 for his involvement in racketeering to collect unlawful debts. In 2006, Falzone became the acting boss of the family when Joe Todaro Sr. retired. Author Ron Fino suggests that Falzone was only the fronting boss for the Todaros. Falzone died on November 12, 2016. Benjamin "Sonny" Nicoletti Jr., also known as Mr. Nick, is the former underboss and capo of the Niagara Falls crew. His father Benjamin J. Benny Nicoletti Sr. was the former capo of Niagara Falls in the Buffalo family. In the late 1960s, Nicoletti Jr. worked with his father controlling a sportsbook operation in Niagara County. On November 26, 1968, Nicoletti, along with his father Nicoletti Sr., Peter Magaddino, Sam Pugilis, Gino Monaco, Pasquale Pissarro, Augustine Rizzo, Louis Tavano, Michael Farrella and Stefano Magaddino were indicted on conspiracy and violation of the Interstate Transportation in Aid of Racketeering Act. The charges against Nicoletti Jr. were later dismissed because of illegal wiretaps. In 1977, Nicoletti was a suspect in the November 14, 1977 murder of John Certo, after witnesses saw Certo slapping Nicoletti's niece in Niagara Falls bar. On May 2, 1982, his father Benjamin Nicoletti Sr. died. In 1992, Nicoletti was indicted along with Angelo Bobby Plumeri, Vincent Palmieri, Anthony Previte, Pasquale Maxetta, Roy H. Arist, Peter DeLoreto, Paul Kozowski Jr., Alfred Ligamore Jr., Edward A. Loverde, Samuel Mangione, Charles Ogrodowski, Peter Pietranelli, Ricardo J. Ross Jr., and Charles Tattersall on illegal gambling charges in Niagara County. In the indictment, Nicoletti was identified as a captain in the Buffalo family who had been controlling the bookmaking operation in Niagara Falls since the 1970s. In November 1993, Nicoletti pleaded guilty to a felony of running a multi-million-dollar illegal gambling enterprise and agreed to forfeit assets of $250,000 and serve up to a year in prison. Nicoletti owned a number of properties in the Niagara Falls area, including a motel. On September 12, 2002, Nicoletti arrested along with former banker Adam Thomas on racketeering, conspiracy and extortion charges. Nicoletti along with Thomas set up a betting service based in the Dominican Republic, and the any bettor in the United States who was late in paying their debts would be visited by thugs. In 2004, Nicoletti was convicted of felony weapon charges after the police found a couple of high-priced shotguns in his home. In 2006, Nicoletti was promoted to underboss of the family. Nicoletti died on September 3, 2012. Joseph "Joe" Fino, a former capo in the family. His son Ronald M. Ron Fino later became an FBI informant. Fino was a powerful racketeer of Local 210 for the Buffalo family. When boss Stefano Magaddino was arrested in 1968, Fino formed a faction along with John Camilleri and Daniel Sansonese Sr. that plotted to take over the family. Fino began acting as if he was boss until 1972, when he was summoned by the commission to explain his actions. When Fino went to the commission meeting, he was accompanied by his allies Daniel Sansonese Sr., Sam Frangioimore and Roy Carlisi. The commission told Fino after the meeting that Magaddino was still the boss and his group was to back down. In April 1974, Fino along with John Camilleri and members of the Rochester faction plotted to take over the family. On May 8, 1974, John Camilleri was murdered. This left Fino with no more power as Camilleri's Narwhals Social Club crew was taken over by Daniel Sansonese Sr. after boss Stefano Magaddino died. In 1974, the commission installed Sam Frangimore as the new boss of Buffalo. Fino died in 1984. Daniel J. Sansonese Jr. became a made man in 1970 and served as Secretary-Treasurer of Local 210 until his retirement in 1994. His father Daniel G. Sansonese Sr. and brother Victor Sansonese were both members of the Buffalo family. In 1989, Daniel and his brother Victor Sansonese were identified as Local 210 officials and were accused of controlling bookmaking for the Todaros. Daniel J. Sansonese Jr. died on June 16, 2003. John R. Johnny Katz Catanzaro became a made man in 1985. In 1980, Catanzaro was ordered by a federal judge to appear in a police lineup in connection to the murder of William B. Sciolino, a Local 210 steward. In April 1988, Catanzaro, a Local 210 steward, was indicted and charged with demanding and receiving $35,000 in wages to guarantee labor peace as a no-show union steward on the construction of a brine pipeline between Wyoming County and Niagara Falls. In November 1988, Catanzaro was tied into a federal 3-year-long investigation into international drug trafficking between Buffalo and Sicily. The investigation concluded with 200 arrested that linked the Sicilian mafia families Spatola, Gambino and Inzerillo and the American mafia families in Buffalo, New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago and San Francisco with international drug trafficking. Catanzaro was arrested along with Joseph P. Lombardo, Frank Grisanti, Ronald H. Chimera, Frank J. Mahiques, Fred M. Saya, Gary L. Carter, Paul J. Palladino, Angelo P. Rizzo, Francis Catania, Victor Catania and Paul Catania, and they were charged with counterfeiting Rolex watches. In 1990, Catanzaro, a Local 210 steward, was convicted of having a no-show job and sentenced to 27 months in prison. In 1996, Catanzaro along with other members of the Buffalo family were forced out of Local 210 Luana. In March 2000, Catanzaro along with Donald Panepinto, Frank Mambrino, and his son Carmen Mambrino, Joseph DeGioia, and Nunzio Canizzaro and Robert Chimera were indicted and charged with running an illegal gambling business from the Donato Social Club on 188 Grant Street. On November 10, 2007, Catanzaro died. Joseph P. Rosado became a made man in 1985. In 1990, Rosado was convicted of having a Local 210 no-show job. In 1996, Rosado along with other members of the Buffalo family were forced out of Local 210 Luana. Rosado died on February 9, 2009. Past Canadian faction members: Giacomo Lupino, former capo of the Lupino crew in Hamilton. Giacomo Lupino died of natural causes at the age of 87 in March 1987, whereby his son Jimmy Lupino took over the Lupino family. Johnny Pops Papalia is a former made member of the Buffalo family. He was the boss of the Papalia crew of Hamilton. His crew included his three brothers Dominic, Frank and Rocco, and his brother-in-law Tony Pugliese. Papalia top two lieutenants were Carmen Barillaro, who controlled gambling in Niagara Falls, and Ennio Mora, who had control of gambling in Toronto. On May 31, 1997, Papalia was murdered by hitman Kenneth Murdoch, who was hired by the Musitano crime family leaders Pasquale, Fat Pat Musitano, and his brother Angelo Musitano. Frank Papalia, former associate of the Buffalo family. Frank Papalia along with his brother Johnny Papalia led the Papalia crew of Hamilton. His father Antonio and mother Maria Rosa Italiano had immigrated to Canada from Della Nuova, a village in Calabria, Italy. His father Antonio worked for Canadian mobster Rocco Perry. During his youth, Frank Papaleo was a boxer before joining his father and three brothers Johnny, Rocco and Dominic into the mafia. His brother Johnny Papaleo was a made member of the Buffalo family. When Johnny Papaleo became the boss of the Buffalo family's Canadian faction, Frank became his brother's underboss. In 1997, his brother Johnny was killed. Frank took over leading the crew but the crew's influence in Canada declined significantly. Frank began suffering from Alzheimer's in the early 2000s and died on April 15, 2014. Carmen Burlaro is a former made member of the Buffalo family. Burlaro was one of Johnny Papaleo's top lieutenants and was responsible for controlling gambling, bookmakers and loan sharks in Niagara Falls. On July 23, 1997, Burlaro was murdered by Kenneth Murdoch, who shot him 2 times in his Niagara Falls, Ontario home. Burlaro's murderer Kenneth Murdoch told police that it was hired by the Musitano crew leaders Pasquale, Fat Pat Musitano and his brother Angelo Musitano. Eno, Pegleg Mora, former associate of the Buffalo family. In 1968, Moore immigrated to Canada and began working with Siderno Group leader Rocco Zito. Moore later worked with Paul Volpe in Toronto. He eventually became a top lieutenant for Johnny Papaleo and was responsible for controlling illegal gambling clubs in Toronto. In 1979, Moore lost his left leg below his knee from a shotgun blast when burglars tried to rob a gambling house that he was protecting. The police suspected that Moore and Papaleo were involved in the 1983 murder of Paul Volpe. In the early 1990s, Moore along with Johnny Papaleo and Carmen Burlaro borrowed $7.2 million from Vito Rizzuto and the trio refused to pay back the loan to Rizzuto. On September 11, 1996, Moore was murdered as he pulled his gold-colored Cadillac into the driveway of a farm in Vaughan. He was shot 4 times in the head. Paul Volpe, former made member of the Buffalo family who was sponsored by Giacomo Lupino, Jimmy and Harold Bordonaro in Hamilton. Volpe maintained a close relationship with both the Lupino and Bordonaro families in Hamilton. During the 1960s, Volpe became one of Stefano Magaddino's top men in Toronto. In 1983, Volpe was murdered. It was suspected that Johnny Papaleo and Eno Mora played a role in his death. Past associates: Peter A. Capitano Sr., a former associate. He served as a former business manager, secretary-treasurer, business agent and executive board member in Local 210. In 1999, Capitano Sr. was found to be a mob associate and was removed as a trustee of the International Union. His 2 sons Samuel and Peter Capitano Jr. were also members of Local 210. Capitano Sr. died on September 1, 2017. Government informants and witnesses: Ronald M. Ron Fino, associate and FBI informant. His father Joseph Fino was a capo in the Buffalo family. In 1964, he secretly began providing the FBI with information of union corruption. In 1970, he served as a business agent in Local 210 and later business manager. Fino was later exposed as an FBI informant and testified against all the Local 210 union corruption. After testifying, Fino continued to work with the FBI and went undercover to infiltrate the Russian mafia and expose illegal arms smugglers, child porn organizers, narcotics dealers, and international money launderers. References. Notes. Sources: Syndicate, Andre. Noel, Andre. Mafia Inc. The Long, Bloody Reign of Canada's Sicilian Clan. Vintage Canada, 2012. ISBN 0307360415. Capisi, Jerry. The Complete Idiot's Guide to the Mafia, 2nd edition. A fascinating exploration of the real people who inspired The Sopranos. Penguin, January 4, 2005. ISBN 1440625824. Humphreys, Adrian. The Enforcer, Johnny Pops Papalia, A Life and Death in the Mafia. HarperCollins, 2000. ISBN 0006384935. Zarnoda, Lorna MacDonald. Wicked Niagara. The Sinister Side of the Niagara Frontier. Arcadia Publishing, 2011. ISBN 1625841299. Griffin, Joe. Mob Nemesis. How the FBI Crippled Organized Crime. Prometheus Books, 2010. ISBN 1615924027. Giancana, Sam. Bernstein, Scott M. Family Affair, Greed, Treachery, and Betrayal in the Chicago Mafia. Penguin, 2010. ISBN 1101185570. Schneider, Stephen. Iced. The Story of Organized Crime in Canada. John Wiley & Sons, 2009. ISBN 0470835001. Edwards, Peter. Auger, Michel. The Encyclopedia of Canadian Organized Crime, From Captain Kidd to Mom Boucher. McClelland and Stewart, 2012. ISBN 0771030495. Ritzel, Michael F. Gangsters and Organized Crime in Buffalo, History, Hits and Headquarters. Arcadia Publishing, 2012. ISBN 1614235449X. Fino, Ronald. Ritzel, Michael. The Triangle Exit. Contento de Semric, 2013. ISBN 965550190. United States Congress. House. Committee on the Judiciary. Subcommittee on Crime, United States. Administration's efforts against the influence of organized crime in the Laborers' International Union of North America. Hearings before the Subcommittee on Crime of the Committee on the Judiciary, House of Representatives, 104th Congress, 2nd Session, July 24 and 25, 1996. ISBN 0160542111. Further reading: Dubrow, James. Mob Rule. Inside the Canadian Mafia. Macmillan, 1985. Sifakis, Carl. The Mafia Encyclopedia, 2nd edition. Checkmark Books, 1999. Divida, Louis P. A Wiser Guy, 2016. Griffin, Joseph. Mob Nemesis. How the FBI Crippled Organized Crime. Prometheus Books, 2002. Edwards, Peter. The Northern Connection. Inside Canada's Deadliest Mafia Family. Optimum International, 2006. Dubrow, James. Roland, Robin. King of the Mob. Rocco Perry and the Women Who Ran His Rackets. Penguin, 1987. External links: Pennsylvania Crime Concession. Organized Crime in Pennsylvania. Traditional and Non-Traditional. April 15, 1988. The Nevada Observer. Herbeck, Dan. Justice Department. Claims union has been dominated by the mob. Buffalo News, New York. January 31, 1996. U.S. vs. Laborers International Union of North America, AFL-CIO, 212-page RICO complaint statement of Ronald M. Fino to Subcommittee on Organized Crime, July 24 and 25, 1996. The Cosa Nostra and Labor Racketeering by Ron Fino, 1998.